So, in preparation for my release of my little video on Chile, I'm going to do a quick little overview. My video is a concoction of clips, a cornucopia of clips from various video sources, documentaries for the most part, that I put together, primarily revolving around what's called the coup of 1973. So, a couple of footnotes. One, that prior to the coup, Chile was one of the oldest, longest running democracies in the world, constitutional democracies in the world. That being that date being set from 1925 up until 1973. Um, in 1925, the country overcame a short coup, military coup d'état, and instituted through a plebiscital rule, which is not a representative democracy, but a straight one person, one vote a rule, established a constitution that ran until 1973. That was superseded by the only historically self-described fascist regime ever to operate within South America, and that's the Pinochet regime. Okay, so as such, a couple interesting things that I want to get into. This goes with my Kill the Crown. If I can't convince Americans that they're not Americans, that they're still subjects of the crown, maybe I can mess with some Chilean heads. First and foremost, I want to submit that the US dollar is based on a Federal Reserve note. Maybe this video is for Chileanos in particular. So as you see at the top, right here, this is a Federal Reserve note, a Federal Reserve, much like the Central Bank of Chile, which was also implemented in 1925, can be described as an autonomous entity, separate from the government. The imposed or proposed intention behind this type of a maneuver is so that the authority of the state does not affect the operation of the bank, implying that the bank effectively, well, legally, the bank supersedes the government. And on another term, implying that the bank is not supposed to be corrupted by the government in both the United States and Chile and most of the world, to be honest with you. But these two particular cases, both countries are considered functioning democracies, and as such, that means that the bank are supposed to be outside of the influence of the democratically functioning government. And I'm not 100% sure about the Central Bank of Chile, but I'm assuming because of the time in which it was instituted, a few years after the Federal Reserve System, that it's probably the same model, which means that it's tied directly to the Central Bank of England. In particular case with the Federal Reserve System, it's 95% owned by English interests, by the Crown. So 5% owned by American interests. And I'm sure Chile is probably about the same, if not 100% owned for the most part, which effectively means that every economic transaction that occurs between the citizens that are legally bound to use as means of currency the private property of a corporate entity that is outside of the purview of the government. It's a type of contractual social contract type of agreement in which by like we learned this from William Paley's on the duty of submission to civil government, that part of the establishment of the social contract of a subject or a citizen to the sovereign, whether that be a monarch or a constitution or other or republic type government, is the acquisition of private property. Well, the use of private property for currency, as the Federal Reserve note is a private property of a corporation, is another means of establishing a type of social contract that produces a ward, guardian, pupillage, or tutelage type relationship between two parties, that being primarily the individual and the entity. So Chile. A couple things about Chile. Interesting to note. The effect, similar to the effect of England. England, it doesn't produce anything. It's not even as big as it is. It's not the UK, because Ireland doesn't want it and Scotland doesn't want it. It's basically the English are they're now defined as a non-country. I think that's a legal loophole to prevent them from being legally liable for all of this crazy shit that they're still involved in, which is basically theft and fraudulent concealment and all kinds of stuff like that. So, but on a quick overview of Chile to show you the effects of the coup d'etat, Salvador Allende, who was the primary target, well, not the primary target, he was the means of the coup. The primary target of the coup was Chile itself, and basically I'm going to give you a quick rundown. So this is the copper production, source ICSG, I'm not 100% sure what that is. But from this source, I've learned that Chile represents 33% of the global copper, and that roughly amounts to 6 million tons of production each year. And from a projected maximum annual capacity from this ICSG copper, there are several mines listed. These are not all of them, but these are several mines listed, the biggest mines listed in Chile. And so these mines are the Escondita, the Colhasi, and Los Broncos, to name the first three. Collectively, these three mines produce, have a maximum projected annual capacity of 4,600 tons, 4,600 tons. And the next top producing three mines are the Greater Chuquicamata, Los Pelambres, El Teniente, and they have a collective production projected maximum annual capacity of 3,900. So effectively the combined total is basically 8,450 total. The top three with the highest production represent essentially 54%, and the largest sum of the largest copper production of the Chilean market, again, which is 33% of the global market. The interesting thing about those top three are that effectively they're all English owned. There's some Canada, there's a BHP Billiton, Anglo-American, Glencore, Extrata, Anglo-American. Again, they collectively, this is all English owned under the Commonwealth, and it goes to show the injustice that the UK still represents on a global market. The lower producing of the greater producers are Codelco, owns the second highest producing mine, and the fourth high, and and the fifth highest, and the fourth highest is owned by Antofagasta, which is a Chilean-based company. But the important detail in all of this is because of the structure of the Central Bank of Chile and its dependency on the Bank of England. Another interesting note is that for mining costs, from 2007 to 2012, the world's average mining cost of to production was 5.4%, while in Chile it was 9.9%. It's the highest. It's virtually double. Actually, it is almost, yeah, it's virtually double. And that's sources from Reuters, IMF, and ZC estimates. As such, because of the structure of the central bank and the Chilean currency, just like the Federal Reserve note being an interest-bearing instrument of debt that directly ties to the Bank of England, while England owns the majority of copper production in Chile, it likewise operates in a way that exasperates the cost of producing or getting to the copper. One interesting thing is that most of these copper mines are in a desert, but their biggest problem is access to energy supply. When this is where you get into something that 90% of Chilean energy production is imported, and that's where you get BP and all of these other extensions of the UK. So moving right on, just one more thing too. The next biggest mine in South America is in next door in Peru, and that produces essentially 992 million pounds. I'm sorry, that's pounds. Oh, so this is 4,600 pounds and a total of 8,450 pounds, not tons. Sorry about that. But so Anatamina produces 992 million pounds total, and that's also owned by two English-based companies. So Peru effectively has no national interest in their own mining. It's just a pirate. It's basically a pirate thing. Something else that's very interesting is where there's copper, there's gold. So let's move along real quick. Now, a big deal here too is that recently Germany and Austria are two countries that have sent requests to England in order to retrieve their gold, because after the World Trade Towers collapsed from the terrorist attack, 9/11, interestingly enough, which there was a gold reserve underneath the towers. England became the primary go-to spot for gold reserves, and companies, synonymous, started sending their gold to there. So one instance is Germany sent whatever amount of tons of gold that they have on reserve to England to hold. Well, a funny thing happened is that just last year, the China was not releasing its full amount of gold that it was purchasing and acquiring throughout the global market. And it turned out that finally, when the numbers were discovered, that China has been acquiring more gold than has been produced in the global market, which led some companies/countries to be concerned about, hey, I wonder if that's my gold.